My Bible is open to Proverbs 14. That is the first place that we will be together this evening. Proverbs 14. We're going to be flipping all through the Proverbs this evening. The lesson, I was kind of floating in my head, being unsure if we were going to be doing anything with the Proverbs this evening or not. I haven't sat with it enough to be comfortable with it. So we are going to work inside of the Proverbs and think of some of the wisdom that it has presented to us. We'll be there here in just a moment. One other thing to share, I misspoke this morning, and so I kind of want to set the record straight on something I mentioned in Acts 15, that when Peter is rehearsing the events of Acts chapter 10, he says in the beginning of his speech, but that is actually Acts 11 and verse 15. And so that doesn't occur in Acts 15, but that does occur in Acts 11. So if you're reading through Acts 15 looking for that, that's why you didn't find it. That is in Acts 11. It is good to see everyone out this evening, and it's always a blessing when we get to be together, spend this time with one another, and to worship our God together. As I said, considering some things from the Proverbs this evening, we're going to think about our speech being wise, speaking in a wise way. And as I said at the beginning of last week, there are a number of things inside of these proverbs. If we are to consider one who is wise like our Savior, that we'll be able to make some connections to him, although not really looking forward to him. It's just a matter of if one is going to act wise, and he was wise, and if we will act wise, we will look like him. And we'll see a number of those places this evening that, although we're not looking forward to the Savior, we'll certainly see some points of comparison that if this wisdom will describe us, then we will begin looking like our God, which is going to open up with the thought in connection to our having wise speech of our being patient. Consider Proverbs 14 and verse 17. A man of quick temper acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. Jumping to Proverbs 15 and verse 1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We're pairing these two proverbs together and recognizing that many of these proverbs are disjointed. You'll have the same subject being discussed across the proverbs here, where it will be addressing one subject, then another, then another, then another, and then you'll come back to addressing a subject that you have already addressed. That's why we're going to be doing a whole bunch of jumping around. But pairing these two proverbs together, recognizing from the 14th chapter there, says, if you have a quick temper, you're going to jump up and you're going to fly off the handle and you're going to do things you shouldn't be doing. You will act foolishly if you will give yourself over to that quick temper. And as far as our applying this to our speech and our talking with others, that we would pair that with 15 in verse 1 here, that if you have a quick temper and you're ready to jump up and fly off the handle, and that leads you to harsh words, that's not going to make things better. That's not going to cool things off. That's not going to foster relationship. That is going to bring about anger. That's going to stir up problems. That's not going to do anything good. Adding to this, in not having a quick temper and acting foolishly, we would look at proverbs that would address the fact that we must not take personal offense at everything. Going back to Proverbs 12 and verse 16. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. If we look at chapter 19 and verse 11, Proverbs 19 and 11 reads, "Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense." Where we connect that thought of being slow to anger, of not being quick to anger, and that there is a glory in overlooking an offense. There is a wisdom in ignoring an insult, where there is discussion and there is someone who is indeed angry, who is lashing out, and it comes upon us. What do we do with that? Are we quick to get angry? Are we quick to jump to foolishness? Or are we quick to ignore an insult and slow to get angry? Are we quick to be patient in that time, in that moment of heat? We would recognize that patience and soft speech would accomplish much for us. Proverbs 25 and verse 15. "With patience a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone." The ideal there is certainly poetic. It's a picture, it's figurative. That here, where you would have soft answer to a harsh word like we previously looked at, he says here that soft tongue, that soft word is able to accomplish much. It is able to break a bone. Patience is able to persuade a person. Patience and soft speech can accomplish much, but for this to describe us, for it to be characteristic of our speech, we must practice self-control. Let's look at Proverbs 16. Maybe I'll hold a finger right here in 25. We do got to come right back to it. But let's look at Proverbs 16 and verse 32. "Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city." Chapter 25 and verse 28. "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." A man who controls his spirit is greater than one who can take over a city. To have the practice of self-control. And if you do not have self-control, as we come to chapter 25 there, that's like a city that's left defenseless. You are a city that anyone can break into you. Anyone can do with you whatever it is they want to do with you, because you are unable to control yourself in that moment of difficulty and hardship. Says, have to practice self-control. Have to be a peoples who are self-controlled, so that we can be a peoples who are patient, so that we can be a peoples who aren't quick to anger, so that we can be a peoples whose speech will be appropriate at the right time. For our speech to be wise, we have to learn the patience of our God. Do you see that in all those slow to anger passages that we just read? How often would our God describe himself as being slow to anger? Such that when the wise writer would come into the book of Proverbs and he says, do you want to know what's wise? Being like God is wise. Taking on the character of God. Godliness is wise. And that particular characteristic here is be slow to anger. Practice self-control to be slow to anger, so that we can look like our God. As we further consider what wise speech in the book of Proverbs looks like. The wise author is going to address listening before speaking. Let's look at Proverbs 18 and verse 13 here. We need to pair several ideals together in this thought. Proverbs 18 and verse 13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. Maybe no one else has struggled with this in the way that I do. I freely admit it is a struggle that sometimes when I'm talking with someone, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, instead of paying attention to what is being said to me. And as the wise author here, he, by inspiration, brings it into, you're hearing a case. Someone is making something known to you that you're going to be applying judgment against and to. Says, if you don't finish listening throughout what they're saying, you're going to miss crucial details. You're going to miss things that are important to recognize and know. He says, you start giving answers, you start getting ready to talk before fully hearing the case out. That's foolish. That's not wise speech. The answer that would come from that isn't akin to the wisdom that would be tied to the fear of the Lord. It's foolish to give an answer before hearing a case. It needs to be heard and heard throughout so that an answer can be given. If we build upon this, verse 15, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Now, there is a lot more application of this particular proverb than the singular application we are about to make. Wisdom does just broadly seek out knowledge. But as we take this proverb and apply it to verse 13 here, the idea of it being foolish to give an answer without hearing a case. What the wise does, what the opposite of the fool does, is seek out knowledge. Well, what is it about this case, about what it is that is being brought to me, about the life circumstance that is being shared with me, the story broadly that is being shared with me as I am in conversation with someone? I want to dig into that. I want to seek knowledge concerning that. I want to show my interest in you and in what you are sharing with me. I'm not just looking for my moment to step in and have something to say, that we are coming closer together in this to fully hear out the case, to seek out knowledge in what is being shared. But as we apply this to a case being brought, let's look at verse 17. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Have you ever had someone come to you? They have had a dispute of some kind with someone, and the other person is the worst person ever. Every interaction that they had with them, they did everything wrong, and the person you're talking to is the one who did everything right. And as you're having that conversation, yeah, I'm right with you in all of this. And then the other person comes and says, that's not how it happened. Let me tell you all of the bad that they did in it. It sure sounded like the first part. Everything was right and it was just done exactly the way it was supposed, until you talk to the other person. That's to pull all of these together. You jump into it and I'm right with you on the. It's foolish to speak before fully hearing out a case. It's foolish to speak without seeking knowledge and digging into it. It's foolish to speak without examining all of the evidence. And it is wise to examine all the evidence. It is wise to seek knowledge. It is wise to speak in this way, lest hindsight cause us to realize we put our foot in our mouth there. We want to speak wisely, and the proverb author here, he would help us to do that as we pair these things together. Let's build one more thing on top of this. If we can head to Proverbs 29 and verse 20. Proverbs 29 and verse 20, we read, "Do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him." We have that problem sometimes, I think, or maybe I should come back to full confession. I have that problem sometimes. There's silence, and you want to say something, want to fill that silence up with something. But sometimes you can fill it up with some things that aren't good to fill it up with. That there does not need to be a hastiness toward speech. I need to hurry up and say something here. You remember the warning, the proverb of James there, that James would tell us to be quick to hear and slow to speak. That there's a waiting. I'm going to listen. I'm going to hear it all. I'm going to look out through this story before I say anything, because I don't want to get to the end and find out new information and then see, oh, I kind of really, again, put my foot in my mouth there. I don't want to be hasty to speech there. So as we bring this then to making a bigger point about when we speak, this will be where we spend more of our time this evening. We want to point out several things that need to be true when we are speaking so that our speech would be wise. The first being, we do not have to say absolutely everything that we think. And I think that this is noteworthy for pointing out. We're going to see the wisdom of it in the Proverbs here as we continue forward. But I think sometimes we may have the thought, if I don't share everything, somehow I'm lying. Somehow I am being deceptive. Somehow I am being dishonest. Sometimes there's, I'm just telling it like it is. And there are instances of that. It needs to fall into the descriptions that we're talking about being wise speech, but sometimes it doesn't matter how good you say something, how wisely you say something. Someone is going to get upset at that. But we do not need to run so far in an understanding of that we'd say, look, that's on my mind, so I'm just going to tell you what is on my mind. If it crosses our minds, it does not necessarily have to be something that crosses our lips. Let's think about some of those things. We have looked at this, but consider chapter 12 and verse 16 with me here. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Here, when a fool gets upset, you hear about it. When the fool is vexed, you know that the fool is vexed. He is about to make his vexation known, and there's not going to be a second of doubt. It is known instantly. But a wise person you may not know that the wise person is vexed. He has been insulted. He is going to ignore the insult. He is not going to return insult with insult because he has overlooked, he has ignored the insult that was given to him. He is not going to make his vexation known. Look with me in chapter 17. In Proverbs 17, let's look in verses 27 and 28 here. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. The one who restrains his words, the one who holds back his words has knowledge. To have a cool spirit, one who is not hot-headed in these moments, is recognized as having knowledge. And then in verse 28, he just tells us how powerful this point is. Does you take someone who isn't actually wise, who isn't actually knowledgeable, who isn't actually intelligent, he is indeed a fool. But if he will just be quiet, if he will just hold back his words, you'll look at him and you'll say, that's a wise man right there. Until he opens up his mouth and removes any thought of his wisdom there. He's strengthening the point of verse 27. He says, you're wise if you would hold back your words, if you would have a cool spirit in these difficult times. This will keep us out of trouble. Proverbs 21 and verse 23. Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. Saying the same thing again, let's look at Proverbs 29 and verse 11. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. Again, there's that picture. It's a foolish thing. Something is bothering you. You have words on your mind. Says the fool gives full vent to his spirit. That's that thought we were addressing here just a moment ago. It's on my mind, so I'm going to say it. I'm thinking it, and I'm going to say it. It would be dishonest if I didn't say it, because boy, it's on my mind. The Proverbs writer says, that's not wisdom. That's not knowledge. That's not prudence. That's foolishness. The fool gives full vent to his spirit. The wise holds back his spirit. That is what would keep us out of trouble. Now, we say all of that and come to the conclusion. Does that mean, okay, there is something that is wrong? That there is something that needs to be addressed. There is something that needs to be talked about, and that means I need to hold back my spirit. That means I don't need to say anything about it. That's not what it means. Let's consider a few other proverbs here. Proverbs 27, going back to verse 5. Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Chapter 28 and verse 23. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. There's wisdom in rebuke. There is goodness in saying and setting forth, this is not right. What you are doing is wrong. These things need to be made right. Now, we're going to point out here in just a moment, even that speech needs to be done properly. That speech needs to be done correctly. But I just want us to see right here, it's not the ideal, it's not the concept of, okay, you just can't say anything. Sometimes something needs to be said. Sometimes, getting into the New Testament here, there's biblical mandate of something being said. If a brother has sinned against us, we are to go to him in those times. We are to say something. But the bigger point, what I want us to see is we don't have to say everything that crosses our mind. We do not have to say everything that we think. We do not have to get all the anger out or all the upset out or all the whatever it is that we are out in our words and give full vent to whatever's going on inside of us. Wisdom clearly defines that as being foolish, where a wise person will hold back our spirits, hold back our mouths and our tongues. That is the wise thing to do. But moving into doing this properly, when there is speech to be done, we would recognize that it is to be done with grace. Chapter 22 and verse 11. Proverbs 22 and verse 11, we read, "He who loves purity of heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king as his friend." We want our speech to be gracious. Might we connect this to, once more, our Savior, that our speech would be as his speech. If we can connect this to Colossians chapter 4, in consideration of the sharing of the gospel, I do want to turn there and read it. Maybe a little less well known to us than James 1 was. Let's read Colossians 4 and verse 6. Colossians 4:6, Paul writes and says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." As there is a sharing of the gospel, he says, everyone that you are talking to, have speech that is gracious. Have speech that is sprinkled with salt, because that is going to lend itself toward knowing how to answer them individually. Do not talk to every single person in the exact same way. Some people are talked to a little bit differently. And he says speech that is seasoned with this graciousness is going to lend itself toward filling that function. When we talk with people, to have wise speech, we need to speak with graciousness, and once more building upon that in a fit and wise way. Proverbs 25 and verse 11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Like a gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. To speak properly, to speak a word fitly. I want to connect back here to a moment ago where we talk about not being hasty, not in a hurry to fill that silence up. Sometimes letting that silence sit is what lends itself to a word being fitly spoken, where there is the time to think through what is going to be said next. There is a time to or for the other person to sit and work through the conversation as it is being had, such that the next thing that is said is what is fitting for that moment to be said. Whereas if we are hasty of speech and we just jump in and we try to fill up that silence, we're not thinking through it, we're quick to speak and very slow to hear, and it just doesn't come across right. It's not fitting right for that moment. But if we can let that silence sit, to then come in at the end of that silence with a word that is beautiful, a word that is fitly spoken and spoken wisely. Finally, we are going to conclude with this idea of wise speech is speech that avoids gossip. As we talk about this in terms of dealing with people, in terms of having discussions with people and our talk to them as we are having back and forth, we come to know people better, that we become confidants to them in some degree. We may be the one that they are talking to, and we are the only ones that they are talking to, and we want to avoid gossip. Gossip is not going to help the situation in any way. If there is a problem that needs to be dealt with as it comes up in speaking and discussion with someone, that problem is not solved by going and talking about it with someone else. That problem is solved by talking about it with the person that it is an issue with. It is not wise at all to practice gossip. I want to work just a little bit with this in Proverbs here. Let's go to Proverbs 11 and verses 12 and 13 here. Proverbs 11 and verse 12. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. One, belittling a neighbor, that's senseless, lacks sense, it's foolishness, it is not wisdom. But picking more so up with verse 13, whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets. As we do develop these relationships and learn things that are shared with us and with us alone, you're revealing things that are not yours to reveal. The trustworthy in spirit, the one who would walk as they are to walk, that they're going to hold on to this. They're going to be a trustworthy person. Again, to be very clear, that's not saying, okay, hide things that don't need to be hid. It was shared with me in confidence, and so I'm going to hide it, even though it's a thing that ought not be hidden. That's not what it's about. But when something is shared with us in confidence, and we're going and sharing that with anyone who will listen to us, that's not going to do anything, again, to develop relationship, promote relationship, for us to be talking in a wise way. It's going to do nothing but hurt. And if we can't be relied on to be trustworthy people, how are they going to trust us with the gospel? How are they going to trust us with the sharing of our Savior? How are they going to trust us with a demonstration of the faithfulness of our God? It doesn't do any good. Need to avoid gossip, and it's going to stir up anger. If we can conclude here with Proverbs 25 and verse 23. Proverbs 25 and verse 23. The north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue angry looks. The ideal of a backbiting tongue, that is, I think, the majority of translations there. They use that word backbiting. That word backbiting, that's hidden or covered up. A hidden tongue here is going to bring anger. It's a hidden tongue, it's a backbiting tongue because it's hidden from the one that you are talking about. You are biting at them from behind their back where they cannot see it. That's why that word comes to mean what we recognize as being backbiting, because it's talking about someone behind their back. It says, and that stirs up anger. That doesn't do any good, just like the northward wind would bring in the rain, and that seems to be the better reading there instead of driving out the rain. Just like it would bring in the rain, if you have this tongue that would whisper about someone behind their back, that doesn't do any good. All that does is bring anger. And let me drive the point home a little bit more. I think sometimes when we read that word gossip, we read that as untrue things about someone. And that is what makes it gossip. I'm whispering about them behind their back, and it wasn't true, so it was gossip. And if it was true, then all of a sudden that makes it not gossip. I hope in our looking together at 11 and verses 12 and 13 there, we saw in that sharing of secrets and that not being wise, that's true things. That's things that are, there's no lie in it. There's no deceit in it. It's a sharing of secrets, and that's not wise speech. That's not good speech. Gossip doesn't mean you're talking about someone and it's not true. There's a talking about someone behind their back, that there is a backbiting. Can it be untrue things? Sure. But it can be true things as well. And I hope this would give us the wisdom that we would recognize we don't want that to be a part of us. We don't want that to describe our speech. We don't want our speech to be looked at, and God, as He's putting a stamp upon that, He says, that's foolishness. That's how a fool speaks. We would want our God to look at our speech and He would say, that's wisdom. That's what I want my people's speech to look like. That is what I have called my people to be. And I hope that the Proverbs here have helped us with that this evening. As we do bring these things to a close, and we think about walking with our God, looking like Him, we would end by thinking about that and by asking if you are walking with our God this evening. If you are walking in the wisdom that would begin with the fear of the Lord. Are you living as our God would have you to live? And if you aren't, why aren't you? Don't you see the good things that our God has given to us? Won't you walk with His wisdom? If there is anything at all that we can do to help you with that this evening, won't you come while we stand and sing the song selected?